Imagine this, a lost child wandering the chaotic streets, frightened and alone. But amidst the turmoil, the Philadelphia police officers swoop in, embracing the toddler with open arms, providing a beacon of hope in the darkness. It's a heartwarming scene and a heartfelt tale of the brave men and women of the Philadelphia Police Department saving an abandoned 2-year-old during a protest. Let's take a moment to appreciate their selfless act of heroism. But wait a moment, these brave men and women weren't expecting a bystander to be recording what truly happened that evening. What had actually happened reveals a very dark, different side to this story. Let's delve into the truth behind the facade. Contrary to the narrative portrayed, the reality is far from heartwarming. In fact, these officers never actually saved an alleged lost, wandering child.
All the windows in that joint. Was there kids in there? Somebody just hopped out with a baby. Come on. They just bust up all the windows. Oh my gosh. I'm shook. Out the car, and there was a kid in the car. They literally just bust up all of them windows to get them people out the car. This woman walked out with a baby in her hand.
A Facebook page for the National Fraternal Order of Police posted this image, along with a faux story about the child being abandoned. This incident serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. While we initially thought the police were saviors, it's essential to question their actions and motives. The truth is, incidents like these raise doubts about the credibility of those tasked with protecting our communities. To further understand these implications, I spoke about this in a previous video. In a previous story that I covered, the Fraternal Order of Police utilized taxpayer funds to defend a Baltimore police officer involved in excessive force against a 14-year-old boy. They fought relentlessly, even attempting to take it to the Supreme Court. It begs the question, what are their true priorities?
And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers.
In the face of mounting evidence, we must ask ourselves, can the public trust the Fraternal Order of Police? Are they truly working in the best interest of the public, or are they merely protecting their own members, regardless of whether the officers they defend are right or wrong? Clearly not. In fact, they work in the direct opposition of the interests of the community that their members claim to, quote, serve and protect. They have lobbied heavily for legal loopholes that allow law enforcement officers to lie to the public. It's a tool they wield to shape their hero narrative, regardless of the truth. Furthermore, court precedents have established that officers have no legal obligation to protect citizens. It's a harsh reality we can't overlook. When confronted with their misleading Facebook post and the false narrative they spread, both the Fraternal Order of Police and the Philadelphia Police have chosen to remain silent. Their refusal to address the concerns of the public speaks volumes about their accountability and transparency. So, why would the police lie to the public? It's simple. In the case of Frazier versus Cupp, the Supreme Court held that law enforcement officers may use deceptive tactics in the course of their duties. This includes making false statements or presenting false evidence, as long as the tactics do not violate the suspect's constitutional rights. In the case of United States versus Russell, the court concluded that as long as the government did not create a substantial risk of harm to innocent third parties, the use of deceptive tactics was permissible. There's an issue with that though. Rikia's rights were violated. They had no right to forcibly remove her from her vehicle. She wasn't breaking the law. They also had no right to kidnap her child. These facts alone would easily pierce their qualified immunity. In the case of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, the Supreme Court indeed emphasized that law enforcement agencies and individual officers do not have a constitutional duty to prevent crime or protect individuals from harm. This principle has been reinforced in other cases as well, such as Warren versus District of Columbia and Bowers versus DeVito. These cases have established that while law enforcement agencies and officers have a general responsibility to maintain public order and prevent crime, they do not have an affirmative legal duty to protect individual citizens from harm. They even try to use the shielding of qualified immunity to protect themselves in situations like this. Qualified immunity has been a subject of significant debate and criticism. Critics argue that it can shield law enforcement officers from accountability, making it difficult for individuals to seek recourse for alleged rights violations. It is seen by some as a barrier to holding officers accountable for their actions, especially in cases involving excessive use of force or other misconduct. Critics argue that the broad interpretation and application of qualified immunity can allow officers to engage in misconduct without fear of legal consequences. They contend that this doctrine can contribute to a lack of accountability and undermine public trust in law enforcement. On the other hand, proponents of qualified immunity argue that it provides necessary protection for government officials who are required to make split-second decisions in challenging and potentially dangerous situations. They assert that it allows officers to carry out their duties without fear of constant litigation and potential financial ruin. But there's a fundamental issue with that. Why is it that they are afforded qualified immunity when making split-second decisions? Why are they afforded the luxury of not having to live with the fear of having to face litigation and potential financial ruin, yet we the citizens are not afforded that same right? To me, that's a blatant violation of the 14th Amendment. Critics argue that qualified immunity creates an imbalance of power and undermines the principle that all individuals should be held accountable for their actions. They contend that it can shield law enforcement officers from being held liable for rights violations, even in cases where their actions are deemed unconstitutional. The argument against qualified immunity is that it can lead to a lack of accountability and hinder the ability of individuals to seek justice for alleged rights violations. It has been suggested that qualified immunity should be re-examined or reformed to ensure that individuals, including law enforcement officers, are held accountable for their actions when they violate clearly established constitutional rights. Unfortunately, there are limited avenues for citizens to challenge or roll back qualified immunity. The first issue is judicial interpretation. The current scope and application of qualified immunity have largely been shaped by judicial decisions, particularly those of the Supreme Court. The court has set high thresholds and legal standards for overcoming qualified immunity, making it challenging for individuals to successfully bring claims against law enforcement officers. This interpretation has created a precedent that restricts the ability of citizens to hold officers accountable. The second issue is judicial reluctance to overturn precedents. Courts, including the Supreme Court, generally show deference to established legal precedent. Overturning qualified immunity would require a significant shift in legal interpretation, which courts may be hesitant to do without substantial legal or legislative guidance. Another hurdle is legislative inertia. Qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that can be modified or abolished through legislative action. However, enacting changes to qualified immunity requires political will and consensus among lawmakers. The complex nature of the issue, coupled with the divisive nature of police reform debates, can make it challenging to garner support for significant reforms or changes to qualified immunity at the legislative level. There's also the issue of law enforcement influence. The law enforcement community, including police unions and organizations, often wields considerable influence over legislative processes. They may advocate for the preservation of qualified immunity as a means of protecting law enforcement officers from potential legal liabilities, arguing that it is necessary to maintain their ability to effectively carry out their duties. The final point that I would like to point out is public perception and awareness. Qualified immunity is a complex legal doctrine that does not receive significant public attention or awareness outside of legal and advocacy circles. Lack of public pressure or understanding of the issue contributes to the limited momentum for reform or public demands for changes to qualified immunity. With that being said, I would like to ask you what you would propose we as a nation should do to combat qualified immunity. While it's easy to just argue that, quote, we should sue, we should vote, etc. I'd like for you to explain in as much detail as possible how we would actually go about effecting change. What are additional avenues that you would recommend for trying to spread the message to those not already involved in the legal and advocacy circles? How should they be informed that qualified immunity goes against the basic fundamental principles established in the 14th Amendment? I look forward to reading your comments related to these questions, and I would like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video.